Hello guys, and welcome back to another cold episode. On today's episode, we're doing something a bit different. As you can tell by the title and the thumbnail, I want to talk about two decks, specifically in Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links, that I feel like not a lot of people are playing or talking about. And those are Witchcrafter and Ritual Beasts. As you can tell, both of these decks, just aren't really seeing a whole lot of representation. And to be fair, I mean, if you're not playing Phantom Knights, most decks aren't really seeing a whole lot of representation. But this to me is particularly egregious because both Witchcrafters and Ritual Beasts are incredibly powerful. They're just solid decks. I would honestly put them in the same tier as something like Magnet Warriors or Buster Blader, in that tier 3 category, where they are powerful and can definitely win you a lot of games. The problem is, they're not as common. They're not played. So basically, I am out here saying, hey, play these decks in tournaments and on the ladder and stuff like that, because these decks are incredibly fun, but two, incredibly powerful, and I think not a lot of people are actually playing these decks. Now, granted, Ritual Beasts are definitely a little bit more older, and so not as many people are willing to go to such an old box to search for the stuff for Ritual Beasts, and I understand that. And Witchcrafters are similar, but this is more so for those who have already made the decks, or what have you. And, I mean, they're both incredibly solid. Ritual Beasts haven't really changed, and the meta hasn't either. And even though the meta does technically hurt Ritual Beasts, as well as Witchcrafters, I still think that they are powerful enough to take games. More recently, Witchcrafter even took one of the tournaments, so there's something to consider. So let me real quick show you some deck lists and why, personally, I think that these two in particular are so powerful. First, let's talk about Witchcrafter. If you don't know what Witchcrafter does, let me explain it real quick. Witchcrafter, during all of their low-level monsters, Shmieta, Pittore, and Genny all have the same effect, where quick effect during the main phase, you contribute the card, discard a spell, and then special summon a Witchcrafter monster of a different name from your hand. Also, they all have graveyard effects as well. Shmieta dumps a Witchcrafter card to the graveyard. Genny copies a Witchcrafter spell from the graveyard and applies the effect. And then Pittore draws a card and then discards a Witchcrafter spell. Or just a Witchcrafter card, sorry. So all of them are incredibly powerful effects, given the fact that you have a spell, right? If you're able to get them off of the field, it's very solid and allows you to go into a lot more recursion or just various different cards. They have an insane boss monster in Madame Vere, which has a full board effect negation effect. You just quick effect, discard a card, negate all of your opponent's effects. Pretty solid, right? On top of that, it has a a damage calculation effect, where during damage calc, if a spellcaster type monster battles, you can reveal cards from your hand, or spells from your hand, to boost the attack of that spellcaster type monster by 1,000 attack and defense until the end of the turn. This is incredibly useful because it allows you to use collaboration, which gives your monster a second attack, to punch over a monster, and then punch for game. Also, this can only be used when it battles a monster. Not too necessarily useful, but still incredibly useful. Moving on, the reason that I think that this deck is underutilized and underrepresented is because of the fact that Neos Fusion is currently unlimited. Well, limited to 3. Neos Fusion is an insane card, especially with Witchcrafters. 1, you fusion summon out Elemental Hero Brave Neos. 2, it's a spell. 3, it's good in the graveyard by protecting your Elemental Hero Brave Neos. And 4, probably the most important part, it sends one of your Witchcrafter monsters to the grave, meaning that you can get a Chimera into the grave to use its effect to then bin another card that could then be useful later. This is one of the best cards for Witchcrafters. It's absolutely insane. I've started playing this card in my Witchcrafter build, and the difference between when I draw it and when I don't is very substantial. But all in all, even with that being said, while this card is great, it's not the end-all be-all. The main reason that this is so useful is the fact that it is a spell, and, you know, having a spell with all of your Witchcrafters is great. It's a spell of a different name, and it's overall very solid. Also, on top of that, another new card that we got was Metal Foes Fusion. If you don't know what Metal Foes Fusion does, you fusion summon a Metal Foes monster from your extra deck. That's all good and dandy. That's not what we're going to be using it for. If this card is in your graveyard, you shuffle it into the deck to draw a card. Absolutely insane, given the fact that you can send it to the grave off of a lot of your Witchcrafters effects. Meaning, you just send a card, and then get a free +1. And if you send it off of something like a Petore, that's a potential +2, or at the very least, draw 2, which is absolutely insane, is for any deck, right? Any deck that can draw 2 has a good time. So, yes, you do have to play 1 brick in Elemental Hero Neos to facilitate the Neos Fusion, but all in all, with the addition of this card as well as Metal Foes Fusion, this deck is pretty much heavily slept on. This deck actually, maybe? I don't remember. One of these decks that I think it's this one, actually won a tournament. It's something similar to this. I don't think it's this deck card for card, but a Witchcrafter deck more recently, within the past like 3 weeks or something like that, did end up winning one of the tournaments, one of the Meta Weeklies or something like that. And the reason for it is because it's pretty strong. Getting just a free special summon of Elemental Hero Brave Neos means that a single removal spell oftentimes, or removal interaction, oftentimes isn't enough to deal with a Witchcrafter board anymore. You now require multiple forms of interaction. And given the fact that Madame Vere literally turns off most monster effects, spells and traps are more problematic, right? But when there's 2 monsters, it all of a sudden makes it a lot more problematic for the opponent to deal with. So, there's that. Other than that, it is a bit inconsistent, which is why I think most people aren't playing it in tournament. But the thing is, if you have 3 games, it's a best of 3, you have a high chance of being able to take at least 2 games to win your series. Yes, you may brick one of those games, but the thing is, the high power level of the deck makes up for a lot of the inconsistencies. At least from what I have seen. I do play this deck. I do think it's pretty nice, and yeah, I just want more people to give it a shot and to play it. Granted, there isn't a lot that you can do with the extra deck, which is one of the main things that that has a lot of the top tier decks favored in that regard. But all in all, it's still a very solid deck. Moving on, we have probably the best investment deck anyone could ever have imagined. This deck, Ritual Beasts, has been around since like 2019 and is still top tier. It's still incredibly good. However, it is difficult to play, as is Witchcrafter. That is the biggest downside, I think, to both of these, and this is more so just to get people interested in these decks. I genuinely love them. I think they're super fun, and so yeah. With Ritual Beasts, they have the unique mechanic of contact fusing. So if you don't know, if you have the 2 monsters necessary to fusion summon any of their fusion monsters on the field, you can just tag them away. This time, instead of sending them to the graveyard or shuffling them into the deck or something like that, you banish them, meaning they're kind of hard to deal with. There aren't a lot of things that can deal with the banish pile. However, there is a skill that can specifically deal with that. But all in all, it's very solid. There is one downside to this strategy and to Ritual Beasts in general in tournament format, and that is the addition of Poisonous Winds in a side deck. Now, with Harpies running around and still being prevalent, Poisonous Winds is very good against them. So you would have to play more back row removal in games 2 and 3, because the opponent will also be playing a card that literally just says Ritual Beasts don't get to play. However, with that being said, Ritual Beasts are still incredibly powerful. They have a lot of side deck space, right? You can include a lot of the staple cards that are very necessary in the current meta, being Floodgate Trap Hole, Book of Moon. You can also include things like Shadow Imprisoning Mirror, because it's just very good. And on top of that, they are able to OTK pretty effectively, given the fact that Ritual Beast Ultipelio is unaffected while it attacks. Meaning, you can punch in for quite a lot of damage if you get 2 of these guys out. It's over 5,000 damage, which not a lot of decks can really deal with. Also, they have things like Petalfin that returns cards to the hand, which is one of the best forms of removal, because if your opponent gets a card out, and then you return it to the hand, all of a sudden, that's kind of a dead card, right? Especially if it's something like an extra deck monster or a boss monster that's difficult to summon. You return it to the hand, all of a sudden, all of that advantage is now gone. On top of that, they have Ulti Petalfin for going first. You sit on this card, it's 2,800 defense. You can tag out with this card and all of the fusions into your Ritual Beast monsters, and then on top of that, this guy is not able to be destroyed by a card effect. So, all in all, just a really solid strategy to play with. I know that the meta is mostly revolved around Phantom Knights just being the best deck definitively, but even with that being said, I don't think that Ritual Beasts have a particularly terrible matchup against any of the top tier decks at the moment. The biggest issue is the side deck. So, all in all, I still love this strategy. I still love Witchcrafters as well. And I would highly suggest to all of you to, if you're still playing Duel Links, play these decks. I think that they are great. I think that they are very fun. And they are some of the best investment decks that you can get. So, all in all, there's that for you. I hope that you guys did indeed enjoy this episode. If you did, a like is very much so appreciated. And if you want to check out more content like this, as well as more Yu-Gi-Oh!, then just be sure to subscribe. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. And remember to always stay frosty. Bye-bye.